Great. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to our attendees. Thank you so much for being here for our panel discussion today. We're going to be talking about coping with holiday and year-end stress in vet medicine. I am the host of our panel discussion today. I'm Dr. Marie Holowaychuk, founder and CEO of Reviving Veterinary Medicine, and I'm really glad to see all of you here. Hello, of course, to those of you who are watching the recording as well. So, we decided to come together as a group to talk about the holiday season and recognize that this time of year, the end of year push, as I like to call it, can bring a lot of unique pressures. There's people taking time off work, so there can be staffing challenges. There's usually illnesses circulating. I can attest to this right now. So, people might be off sick. Clients have a lot of expectations around this time of year. We're often even experiencing a lot of euthanasias this time of year. And of course, everybody's got their personal obligations, the holiday shopping, the holiday parties, the school events and recitals and everything else. So stress can build up quickly and that can impact our well-being. And so today we're going to explore practical strategies for managing that stress. And we're going to talk about everything from boundaries to self-care and beyond. So our goal is for everybody today to leave here with actionable tools and inspiration and reassurances that you are not alone in these challenges and that there are things that you can do to make it through. So I am very thrilled to be joined by our three incredible panelists today. We have Dr. Sonja Olson, a small animal veterinarian and certified yoga instructor, as well as author. Sonja brings over 25 years of clinical and leadership experience and now focuses on promoting sustainable careers in vet med through workshops and wellness programs via Heartstorming Wellness, which is her company. Sonja is a certified mindfulness meditation teacher and neurotransformational coach, and one of our facilitators for Lunch and Learns at Reviving Veterinary Medicine. We also have Simmi Latulippe, who is our functional medicine coach, our Ayurvedic practitioner, certified menopause coach, and also a yoga and meditation teacher as well, living in the beautiful mountain community of Canmore. Simmi integrates traditional healing with modern medical approaches to help individuals cultivate balance, resilience, and lasting wellness. And we're very lucky to have Simmi as one of our Reviving Vet Med coaches as well, focusing on supporting veterinary team members with menopause and perimenopause. Last but certainly not least, we have Sophie Gilbert, also an experienced emergency veterinarian and executive coach. Sophie supports veterinary professionals in navigating high-stress clinical environments, building emotional resilience, and creating sustainable, fulfilling careers. Sophie has just celebrated her 1-year anniversary of having moved from the UK to the beautiful country of New Zealand, where she currently resides. And Sophie is also one of our coaches, predominantly helping team members to foster resilience. So very, very happy to have these panelists today. So I will be moderating the discussion, guiding the questions, and helping us to pull practical takeaways from all of these wonderful panelists. And what you can do at any time throughout our discussion today is to ask questions in the chat. We'll try to answer as many of those questions as possible. We do have questions that we have collected ahead of time. And if you need to leave early, not to worry, there will be a recording that will be posted to YouTube afterwards. There is no continuing education credit associated with our session today, so please feel free to engage at your own pace, take away what's useful to you, and we'll go from there. All right, as I said, I am recovering from a plague that my daughter gave me.
You're still on mute,
We'll
right?
start by unmuting myself. I'm not on my A game today, everybody. I'm sorry. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first question that we have on the docket today is for Sonja. So Sonja, I would love to start with some context.
Yeah.
What makes the holiday and end of year season particularly stressful for veterinary professionals. Are there stressors unique to this time of year, and
Yeah.
what can you share based on your decades of experience?
Yeah. And I mean, thanks, Marie. I think this is a great way of just framing up the conversation that there are stressors that happen all year round, but there seems to be like this dialing up around this time of year for a variety of reasons, some of which Marie already mentioned in the introduction. But there are things that are happening inside the clinic and there are things that are happening outside the clinic, and we're whole humans, right? So we're experiencing all of it, and so are our clients, and so are the animals. So as we go into this time of year, I feel like there's maybe, I love the word I chose, fretting. There's an increased amount of fretting from folks about the holidays, about spending, about the gift buying, around, the rituals of the season. And there's also perhaps fretting around some of the stressors around relationships. And as Marie pointed to, this is also a time of year where your team may be running a little bit more lean, right? So as folks take well-deserved, by the way, time off, it can also put a strain on the team. So I think that as we go into this season, one of the things as a long-term emergency veterinarian that I was thinking about bringing towards folks were really three things that really came to mind, in addition to those, stressors and fretting that come from the humans, is that I feel that there's an increased amount of spending focus on things associated with the holidays. So maybe that's gifts, maybe that's travel, maybe it's on the purchase of food for celebrations, but your budgetary needs have shifted. And so folks are not thinking about the top needs of their animals, particularly if an emergency occurs. So, as a clinician and as a team member, I know that this is a time of market increase in moral distress around not having the means to do what they would really love to do. And that stresses the clients and that stresses the team. Full stop there. This is also a time of year where animals get into things. They get into things, don't they? They may be licking out the water from plants that, like the Christmas tree, or they may be nibbling on holiday plants that should not be maybe in the house with pets. They might find the special chocolatey treats. Oh, and don't forget about xylitol, which is one of those sugar replacements. And maybe, hooray, it's the holidays. Maybe there are some edibles around, or maybe you had a wonderful party and there's lots of leftover alcohol sitting around on the tables. I've seen it. Drunk puppies. So just be thoughtful about what's in the environment. And maybe if you have guests, ask them to be thoughtful about closing up their luggage or closing the door so we don't have any mistakes with gummies. The last one I would bring up, and Marie mentioned it lightly, which we're not going to dwell on it, but it's true. There is definitely, it seems, especially those of us that spend time in both daytime practice and ER, an uptick of euthanasias this time of year. And whether that is a result of financial constraints and financial euthanasia, they don't want their animal to suffer, got that. The other thing, though, that I think is interesting, and we don't have research, but I think all of us kind of know it as practitioners, there's an acute on chronic sort of manifestation of clinical symptoms, particularly things like cardiac conditions, endocrine diseases like diabetes that get thrown out of whack, maybe even things like cancerous processes that have been lurking in the background. But our animals are highly attuned to us, and the stress that we are experiencing and that are then in our environments can sometimes push our animals into a state where they become clinical, and that becomes an emergency. And sometimes that can also lead to an unexpected euthanasia. So I feel like these are things, and then let's not forget our urinary cats, also important. Yeah, so these are things that can happen. So it's just really great for folks to be thinking about what can I do to help ameliorate some of those stressors for my pets as we head into the season, so it's less likely that they're going to experience medical conditions as a result of the stress and anxiety. And that's it. I'm sure that the others on the team probably have some other things to say.
Yeah, I mean, you hit so many nails on the head and spoken like a true ER doctor. I'm just reminiscing about all the different chocolate ingestions and toxic Christmas plant things. And, at the heart of it is I go back to what you shared at the beginning, which is that there's just so much more moral stress this time of year because everybody, veterinary professionals and everyone included, are having their set of stressors this year. And when you add on an unexpected trip to the vet and potentially thousands of dollars in expenses, it very quickly devolves into those situations of having to weigh the cost of the care and what is needed with the capacity emotionally and financially of the family. So, thank you so much for bringing that to the forefront. Um, Sophie, I wonder if you can talk a little bit more outside of the veterinary space now in terms of personal obligations, family, travel, etc. How do those intersect with our professional stressors this time of year? And what strategies have you used to help people balance those stressors?
Those things. Yeah, and I think Sonja actually alluded to this in that sort of first bit of discussion we were just having there. I think it's a really challenging time of year because there's a social pressure around this time of year in terms of Christmas being about family time, about being about rest and relaxation. And there is this expectation that that's what we should all be experiencing and doing. But we all know that within our profession, it doesn't just stop, right? We can't just all take a few days off and have that family time. And again, particularly coming from an emergency background, although often, in GP you are on call, but from an emergency background, often you are the one covering those core shifts. So you're doing the Christmas days, the Boxing days. So I think, Sonja, you used that word moral distress, and I think that's actually really relevant here because I think you've got this pull that you really want to experience that time with your family, and your family might be having a lovely Christmas dinner together or spending some time together, but actually you've got to go to work. And that in itself is really, really hard, and I think really, really stressful. So I think often we get pushed into perhaps doing things that aren't the best for our well-being because we want to experience it, or we want to be able to do our job well and properly, and we want to go and cover our shifts, but we also want to experience that family time as well. So I know I've done it many times where I've maybe driven for many hours after doing a 12-hour shift or a night shift to go and see family, and actually that's really not good for me, and I probably didn't enjoy those periods of time as much as I could have done. But there's that pressure to think, oh, I should be enjoying this time because that's what I'm doing. So I think those sort of physical demands, and again, Marie, you alluded to this, sort of the extra jobs that come this time of year, the present buying, the extra shopping, the cooking, the hosting family. You might be hosting family whilst trying to manage your shift work and everything. That could be so demanding. And I think it's important to recognize those sort of physical demands on us. But again, I think one thing that's really underestimated, or perhaps we as individuals underestimate, is that emotional demand we put on ourselves. There's this expectation, there's this social expectation that Christmas is about joy. And Sonja, you alluded to this, often in our profession, we are doing some really, really difficult things during the day, and particularly around Christmas time. We do know that there is an increase in euthanasias. We do see that, that is documented. And there is an increase often in those financial conversations that we have to have with owners that may be more challenging than at other time of years. So if you've just finished a long shift and you've had, to deal with some of those very difficult and challenging situations, I think then going home and being happy and joyful, enjoying Christmas dinner and doing all the things and feeling that joy, I think sometimes we can think I'm supposed to be feeling that joy, but maybe I'm actually not. And I think that in itself, it can really, that kind of emotional incongruence can be sort of stressful in itself. So I think we know one of the biggest things for our well-being is social connection. But actually, I think in this context, if we are forcing ourselves to put ourselves in that position where we're spending that time with our family, actually, is it really filling our cup? Is it really doing what it needs to do from a well-being perspective? Or actually, do we need to, as individuals, take some personal responsibility for how we manage that? Marie, you alluded to sort of some strategies we can use, and I think it is difficult because there are going to be a lot of things that are outside of our control. So, rotas are rotas at the end of the day. The work needs doing, right? Somebody's got to cover the shift. Somebody's got to do the work. So that's not always within our control, but can we have more control outside in terms of our social obligations, in terms of those physical demands? So having conversations early with your family and your spouse or your partner about how you balance that workload. So making sure that all of those things that you have to do, the present shopping, the food shopping, all of that sort of thing is actually balanced amongst the household. But also talking to your family early and trying to make it so that, you can balance social times at a time that perhaps does more suit you. And setting boundaries for yourself early as well. Like, again, there's a real pressure to say yes to everything, I think, this time of year. You know, you've got the work parties as well. You might have your spouse's work party or your partner's work party. There's lots and lots of things going on this time of year, but actually, do you have to attend all of them? Could you say, actually, it's not going to benefit me because I'm going to be behind on my sleep? So which one of these, identify early, which ones are the kind of the key ones in your calendar that you really want to prioritize and you want to kind of attend, and then figure the rest out about that and just try and set those boundaries and say no. And then I think the final thing is just to remember that this is a time of year where often our own kind of wellness routines or habits that we have during the year can a bit go out the window. And that can be just because it's so busy. And also, you know, everything changes. We're not in our normal schedules. The kids might be off school, or there's a lot of different things going on. You've got family. So again, thinking about what are the key things that you need to do on a daily basis that ground you and can make you feel better. So do you still need to do your daily dog walk? Do you still need to do your morning yoga or your meditation, or whatever it is that you do as an individual as part of that wellness, but trying to still build that into your schedule this time of year, even when it's super busy?
Yeah, so many great points. And, you know, I think what comes up for me when I hear you talking about feeling like, you know, or just reminding yourself you don't have to say yes to everything. I know for me, I often really listen for the shoulds that come up. You know, if I'm like, oh, I should go to church with my family on Christmas Eve, or I should go to my parents first thing in the morning on Christmas Day, or whatever it might be, that's probably a sign that it's not really what I want to be doing, you know? And so there's just this self-judgment and this outer expectation that feels like an expectation on me that I can't say no to. And yet maybe that is a sign to stop and reflect. Like you said, is this really what I need to be doing right now? Driving 2 hours in the car after working 12 hours and then having to turn around and go back to work the next day. And even for those who, you know, have the holidays off and aren't necessarily working shifts, still being very mindful, especially for those who have multiple sets of parents and families and people to visit, that you can spend your entire holiday season going to everybody else's house. And at some point, giving yourself permission to just say, hey, we're going to be at home. Everybody is welcome to come here for a visit, but we're not going to be driving all over the place this holiday season. So I love that. I love those recommendations. Simmi, I want to turn it over to you now and ask what your thoughts are on the early warning signs that holiday or year-end stress is becoming an issue. At what point do people want to stop and think about maybe some of the coping strategies that we have talked about?
Thank you very much, Marie. So the foundations of my practice have always been learning how to listen to the whispers of your body so that your body never has to scream. I'm not sure why we wait for the body to scream to react, because then we've hit that chronic stage and it's serious. But if we learn to listen to the whispers when the body says, no, not today, that's not for me. And as you know, Sophie said, you know, creating those boundaries and the ability to say no. However, I must say, in the healing profession, we tend to give so much of ourselves to our family, our friends, our clients, our animals, and we forget to give back to ourselves. And that's the biggest mistake, because we can't give to others if we're not completely full ourselves and we don't have that natural vitality to be able to give. So how does the body whisper to you when it sees signs? So a lot of it is our moods, mood swings. We tend to become a little bit more snappy, or we tend to become a little bit more angry this time of year, not even realizing where that came from. That's the body saying, oh, you know what, maybe you should slow down. Another one, sleep disruptions. That's a biggie. This time of year, also in Ayurvedic medicine, as we move from summer to fall, our sleep is thrown off incredibly. So we have to work harder to make sure we have good quality sleep. And sleep is the foundation for good health. So if we don't have sleep, what happens? We begin to stress ourselves. So we use our adrenal glands, our cortisol levels rise, and we push ourselves and we become that hamster on a wheel. So the hamster on the wheel keeps running and running and running and running, doesn't listen to the whispers, but only jumps off that wheel when something in life happens and they're thrown off. So, of course, we don't want to go to that stage of chronic fatigue or burnout or, heart attack, whatever it may happen. That's the body's sign that it's screaming to you. You have to slow down. So it's essential that we really start to be more in tune with ourselves. And, Dr. Sophie and Dr. Sonja both gave some beautiful suggestions of how we can do that. And these are things that are free, doesn't cost any money. Going outside, if you can, depending where you live, if you're lucky enough, like Sophie, to live in New Zealand, you can walk bare feet in the grass. Here in Canada, you can't do that, but we do get lots of sunshine, and you can definitely go for a walk in the woods and do some forest bathing. Being with Mother Nature shifts your complete nervous system from an autonomic state of that always going, always doing, and you come into that parasympathetic state of finding calm, finding peace, and finding ease in the body. But again, you have to take the time to do that. And I think that's a big one for us, especially this time of year where it's so busy. We really have to take the time and almost schedule the time. Take 2 minutes and do a few minutes of breath work, like beautiful deep breaths. So you fill your belly, fill your body with your own beautiful breath. That's called pranayama. And the breath work is essential to come into the parasympathetic system. And it only takes 2 minutes. Again, it's free, it's easy, you can do it anywhere. One beautiful hack that I love is alternate nostril breathing. And you can Google it to see how to do it. It's super easy. It only takes 2 minutes. And I actually do it in the car. So when I'm driving and, the roads are clear, I usually have the car on cruise control. I can do a few rounds of alternate nostril breathing. And what that does, it helps to balance the neurotransmitters in the brain. So left and right brain become balanced. And you find that you don't have that mood swings. You don't have that anxiety or that snappiness that sometimes happens when you become irritable. So it's a beautiful, easy hack to do, and you can do it anywhere. And it's a beautiful one to bring you back into your body and quiet the mind and release the stress by coming into a parasympathetic state.
I feel like this panel is designed for me. I feel like this is a personal personal session today because I was not listening to the screams of my body last week when my sleep was off the rails, partially because of stress and partially because my daughter was coming into my room every night. But yeah, I mean, now my body is, wailing because it's having to fight off a virus because my immune system got compromised. So I can really relate to this. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. I think sometimes we're so busy leading up to the holidays that we don't hear the whispers. And then the screaming happens as soon as we stop and we actually do take a break. It's like then the illnesses set in. So I love this notion. And I am definitely one of those people that I just do get a little bit prickly when I'm not doing what I need to do for my body. And so like the shortness, the snappiness, the irritability, I think many of us can relate to that. And of course, that can translate into the workplace. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Sonja because Simmi has just shared with us so many great coping strategies that we can enact anywhere. Some of those apply to the workplace. What other practical strategies do you have for individuals, maybe when they're on the clinic floor or when they're in the midst of a busy clinic shift, when they're facing these emotional cases, these euthanasia decisions, or whatever else might be coming up for them?
Yeah, my offerings are going to really complement what Simmi has already offered. And the first is going to be self-compassion. My friends, you deserve kindness. You deserve care, and you deserve to be in a place where you are resourced. So even just taking a moment to really check in. Maybe you put alarms on your phone to check in every couple of hours just to have like a nudge, nudge, nudge. How are you? I love the acronym that some of my nurses have used. HELP, hydrate, eat, laugh, and pee. Do you need help? So perhaps you do. You're human. And maybe the cool thing for us to recognize also when we practice self-compassion, compassion is a neurologically rejuvenating engine. When we do that for ourselves, we're actually in practice to express compassion for other beings much more effectively. But it starts with you. The other things I would love to add to what Simmi was offering, I'm just a big fan of biohacks, Simmi. So the idea of just tapping into the wisdom of our bodies and your parasympathetic nervous system to bring us back into what's called our window of tolerance, where our sympathetic and our parasympathetic are a bit more balanced. We're a lot less likely to be grumpy or numb and just exhausted and frozen out. So we can do that through a number of different things. I love the power of the pause. The power of the pause. It can be literally just a few moments where maybe as you sit down to do a medical record or you're drawing up some meds, you're washing your hands, pause. As you're doing that, check in with yourself. What's going on for me? What's on my mind? How am I doing emotionally? Is there something I physically need? So the power of the pause is there. And before you enter the next room, perhaps you also pause at the door, hand on the handle, a deep breath or two before you enter the room. So you are present and you are intentional about who you are, and you realign with yourself and your values as you enter that space of caregiver. It's so valuable. I love also bringing us into a place of understanding the power of mindfulness practices. Simmi has offered us some around breath work. GABA as a neurotransmitter goes up to help counterbalance some of the cortisol, norepinephrine that's pumping through our veins when we're stressed out. And it helps to bring our brains and our body into a greater state of balance, ease, availability, and perspective. One of the other ones I just want to offer is the practice of stop. Stop what you're doing. Take 3 very deep, intentional breaths. The O is to observe. Come into your experience. This is grounding. What are your senses offering you? Where are you in your thinking? Where are you in your emotional state? Proceed. It doesn't take long at all. And as Simmi said, this could be as little as 2 minutes. We do have the time to do that. So micro resets. Don't wait until you're crispy. Don't wait until you're flat out and exhausted and you're like, I can't even get up off the floor. Do it along the way, because what it is investing in your productivity, your energy, and your resilience to get through a tough shift.
Yeah, such great recommendations. And I want to go back to what Simmi said, that these are all accessible to everyone. They're free. They don't take a lot of time, and there's real science behind them. Definitely breath work for me has just been astronomical in helping me to really calm my central nervous system when I am moving into that fight or flight space. So great suggestions there from both of you. Thank you so much. I want to turn it back over to Sophie now to talk more about the environment that we work in this time of year. How can veterinary teams foster a supportive environment during the holiday season? For example, when it comes to scheduling, communication, or just sharing responsibilities, making sure that everybody gets to enjoy a piece of the holidays. What do you recommend?
Yeah, thanks, Marie. Actually, Sonja, I just want to say as well, I love that idea of the power of the pause or the stop. I think unintentionally I do that without really thinking about it, but I've done that for a while before, especially if you're like back-to-back consults and you have to go into another consult, and I try and just sort of take that moment to kind of let my brain rest before I go into the next consult, so I can give that consult my whole attention rather than thinking about sort of the critical patient I've got out the back, or the last consult I've just done, or the patient I've just admitted that needs working up. And so yeah, that's really powerful for me as well. And so thank you for that. Yeah, so for this one, Maria, I think I'm going to put more of like a leadership hat on, I think, rather than a coach hat, I think. And I think over the years, I've been lucky enough to manage a number of different teams, always ECC or after hours. So it's always been that kind of management of scheduling throughout this time, but also being in that position where I'm trying to support my team members, like you say, to be able to get some downtime, to be able to manage those really busy shifts. They often do tend to be much busier this time of year from an ACC perspective, and more critical patients as well, generally. So not only a higher volume load, but just in terms of the cases you're seeing, much more intensive and much more sort of emotionally draining cases often. So I think from my perspective, I sort of separate this out into two parts, and that's almost the practical things that we can do as a team or as a leadership, and then also the emotional stuff as well. And we've talked a little bit about what we can do as individuals, but I think from the practical side of things, I think planning early is an absolutely huge one. So like you say, when it comes to sort of scheduling, we all know that everybody's got to play a part in what we do this time of year. And I think there can be a lot of angst around the scheduling. I worked Christmas Day last year. I worked Boxing Day last year. I've worked Christmas Day 5 years in a row. So it can actually get really difficult for the team if they feel they're being unfairly put upon, or that they're getting the rubbish shifts in comparison to some of their other team members. And I think also a shout out to those people that don't necessarily have families or children as well. I think there's an internal pressure to allow those people to have those days with their families, but actually just, I don't have my own children, and just because I don't have children doesn't mean I don't want to have some of that time off as well. So I think we put that pressure on ourselves, and not saying it comes from anywhere else, but I think just managing that whole sort of time can be really challenging. So I think my biggest advice from my experience would be not only plan early, but involve everybody in the decisions as well. Because if you're involving the whole team and allowing some level of flexibility in terms of those decisions that you're making over who's going to do what and where that's going to be, then it allows them to have some sort of impact in that themselves, and to have some sort of control over their own schedule, which I think can be massively helpful from a psychological perspective, because you feel as the individual like say you've had some control and you've been able to have some say in what you're doing. I think the other thing is try as a team to build capacity into what you're doing. So from an ECC perspective, this is difficult because you're only seeing emergencies, but from a day practice perspective, there are lots of things that we can do at this time of year to try and just manage our schedules a little bit better. And that goes for the whole team. So that's receptionists, ACCAs, nurses, vets, wherever you are in the practice, you've all got your own individual difficulty stressors, things that are going on. You've got the clients coming in last minute for the script for the chronic meds at Christmas Eve at 4 p.m. when you're trying to shut, and all of a sudden the receptionist has to deal with the angry client, or, it's all of those sorts of things that can happen this time of year. So sitting down as a team in plenty of advance and discussing what sort of things you're going to do to try and build that space into that schedule. So could you stop routine surgeries the week before Christmas? Could you stop even routine consults? You don't need to do the wellness check on Christmas Eve. You don't need to necessarily do the vaccination. So building that time into our schedules so that we can have that space to see the emergency patients, to see those patients that do need to be seen that time of year. And again, often we know that we can have an increase in the amount of euthanasias we're seeing. So again, allowing time for that in the schedule rather than trying to squeeze them in where we can. I've seen that time and time again where we have a jam-packed sort of busy routine schedule, but actually we know these cases are going to come in last minute. So why aren't we building that into our schedules? Could you increase the length of your consults for that time? Again, it's likely that 10-minute vaccination consult is going to turn into the quality of life discussion for the 16-year-old Labrador. It just happens. It's this time of year. So we know that's going to take longer than that 5 or 10-minute vaccination consult. So again, just having some mindfulness from a team perspective, but also a leadership perspective, I think, around how we can manage that allows our team to feel like they're doing a brilliant job. They're giving the clients and the patients what they need to give, but without being completely overwhelmed and overrun, trying to fit it all into a normal working day. Now, I do recognise the caveat to that is that the routines then tend to come after Christmas if you cancel them in January. So there is a bit of there's some thought around how you manage that. But I think it's just really important that scheduling actually allows your team to take those moments, to take those 5 minutes of break, to ensure they get their lunch break, to ensure they're getting home at 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve so they can go and see their families. Because otherwise they are going to be there doing the follow-up phone calls or the repeat scripts until late that night. And that's obviously not fair. And then I guess just the final bit on that kind of practical piece is have a backup plan for the plan and a backup plan for the plan, because there's nothing worse than being that skeleton crew on the day, and you're like, cool, we've got a plan. We're not seeing routine consults and we're not doing this, but something's going to happen, right? Something always throws that plan out the window. And as a leadership team, you need to be able to have put in protocols or things for your team that support them, that they can make the right decisions in that moment, and then not just faced with that angry client at 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve saying, well, I need my script now. And you're going, well, that's, we can't do that for you. That's not a position anybody wants to be in. So having that level of support and how your team can manage those moments and what those kind of backup plans are going to be for those things. And then I guess from an emotional perspective, I think it's about watching out for each other at this time of year, and not only recognizing signs in yourself, but looking out for your teammates as well. And, it's one big team, isn't it? So if you see that somebody has had 5 euthanasias scheduled in the last week or last couple of days, actually, that's a big load on that person. So can they be sort of spread out a little bit amongst, if you've got, it's difficult if you're the only vet in the practice, but if you've got other vets in the practice, or how can you manage those workloads and those particular types of consultations so it's not all just on one person. Again, if somebody's buried under a pile of callbacks or a pile of repeat scripts or something, can somebody else chip in and help out and try and just manage that workload between all of us? So watching out for the signs that Simmi and Sonja talked about, those signs in your colleagues. If you notice one of your colleagues is just getting a little bit more snappy than normal, don't take it personally, but think what might be going on for them right now, and how can I help them and support them, and how as a team can we pull together to manage whatever's going on for them. And then I guess more practically, just making sure that everybody's aware of where they can get support this time of year, and where those sort of resources are for your team members.
Yeah, so many great recommendations, right from what the practice managers and owners can do to what the team members can do to support each other. And yeah, we're all human beings at the end of the day, and all humans are feeling challenged this time of year. We all have our own innate stressors, whether they be financial, familial, relational, mental, emotional, and otherwise. Heather is a rural animal practitioner here in Alberta, and shares, I find that juggling my household and mom duties, prepping for the holidays and working, is stressful. Sometimes I'm not fully present and feel stressed jumping from one appointment to another as we're short-staffed because one vet is out all day doing preg checking, right? We also have more clients coming in a bit more prickly due to their stress with the holidays too. So that goes back to what you shared, Sophie, where it's like we have to recognize that everybody has their stuff, and to not make that about us, right? 9 times out of 10, when owners get angry about a bill or a diagnosis or something, it has nothing to do with us, and it has everything to do with their own fear regarding their finances, or their grief regarding being scared they're going to lose their pet. So among many other things. Sonja, I want to turn it back to you and ask you about boundaries, which I know you and I have talked about many times. How can boundaries help with coping with this year-end stress? And the million-dollar question, which I am always asked, is how do people set boundaries without feeling guilty?
Yeah, right. Well, and I think we're already weaving this in. I've heard it from Sophie, I'm hearing it from myself and from Simmi. So, y'all, the articulation and the holding of boundaries is an evergreen territory. It takes, practice, it takes self-compassion, it takes real awareness, and the giving of permission to yourself, and that you have worth. And yes, there are going to be times where no is not an option, but there might be a modification of a yes. So I really love us to maybe lean into being more skillful with negotiation around some of the things Sophie offered is brilliant, around having that proactive, collaborative, compassionate communication with the team and the clients, so that they are aware, these are our hours, these are the things that we're doing, these are the things that we're not going to do right now for the following reasons. We are running lean on, we're making more room for, we will be available to do these things for you after the holidays. The more you can proactively communicate the things that I was really feeling, I want you as my leader, Sophie, because what I'm feeling is I'm feeling seen, I'm feeling appreciated and valued as a part of the caregiving team. That matters a lot. That matters a lot. So when we create a culture that we care for ourselves and each other, boundaries are more likely to be articulated, heard, and held. And it's up to you. So you really have to determine for yourself, what are those places where you're going to like, this is really valuable to me, and I'm going to have a real strong boundary around this. And remembering that you can have a no around something, and it can be just no. Although I think that most of us, being who we are, offer a bit more embellishment because it's just our nature. We feel bad. We want to be part of the team. We don't want to let our team down. So as Marie was saying, the guilt factor, and it's not just our team. We also feel like we're letting our families down, friends down, etc. But what about you? You're letting yourself down in some ways. So I just offer the perspective that you matter as well. And I love the idea, we've talked about it. Where are your micro breaks to keep you topped off on your energy, making sure you're looking out for yourself, for your teammates. And I also heard something that Sophie was just saying, and Marie was reinforcing it. Humans are humans, and they go through things. And instead of taking it personally or getting into a mindset of that's an angry person, that's a person that is experiencing anger because something is going on that is pushing them into that space. Fear, lack of control, shame around not having finances. There's a lot of things that can really push people. So, in the space of having that really compassionate lens of, oh, human, what's happening over there for you? And not taking it personally. Sometimes that means, by the way, you're human too. Take a beat. If you need to step out of the room and say, I'll be right back, I just want to go check on something, I promise I'm going to be right back. And you go out of the room and you, whoo, okay, shake that off, reset your brain, fix your face, and go back in and be more available. And yes, there are boundaries also around. You are not an emotional doormat. So that if you are being vomited on with a lot of big emotions, or if somebody makes you feel unsafe, that's not okay. So of course, those are hard boundaries where you need to call in support or step away. Sometimes people's emotions get really high and hot. By the way, we know with research that it's really, really unlikely that those level of emotions are going to result in some form of violence. But if you are feeling unsafe, fair enough. You go ahead and take care of yourself. The last boundary I want to bring up for all my veterinary friends, our deeply empathic selves, is watching your empathy, taking care of yourself and having compassionate empathy. It's human to sometimes inadvertently take on the emotions of others, and that includes their sorrow and their suffering, and we don't even know we're doing it. We are wired to do it. We have mirror neurons. We energetically attune. So I invite you to, again, know that this is true. This is human. It is what contributes to empathic strain, which we used to call compassion fatigue. This is how we can do the work that we do that is beautiful and meaningful in a sustainable way. It requires attention, boundaries, reset, resource. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, so many great things. Thank you, Sonja, for sharing those. I'm going back to what Heather shared in the chat around, feeling pulled in all these different directions and that you're not doing anything well. And for me, that brings me back to why my boundaries are so important. I have been going through a lot of stuff with my daughter and work and a combination of things, and it's left me feeling depleted, and it's reminded me that when I'm not setting these boundaries, then I am not showing up the best version of myself in any of my roles, parenting, veterinary work, and otherwise. So that guilt, I don't think that guilt ever really goes away because, as Sonja said, we are such empathetic, caring people. However, if you can keep coming back to why this boundary is important, because it allows you to, show up to work well rested, to show up to work not feeling resentful of your clients, or to be able to parent your kids with as much presence as you can, then that's the sentiment that we want to lean into. Simi, I know that you shared a lot of strategies, and I know a lot of those are easy, inexpensive strategies that people can do anywhere. Are there any other self-care strategies that you think would be well adapted to the veterinary environment where time might be limited, energy is limited, schedules are packed? What additional things would you recommend there?
So one thing that came into mind listening to both Sophie and Sonja was protection. So putting my Eastern medicine hat on, energetics. We don't talk about that much in Western medicine, but in Eastern medicine, we get drained when we take on the negative energy of our clients, of our friends, perhaps family members. And again, we don't realize we're taking all this negativity in, but it can very much drain us. So I think we all know what happens when we're in a room or we're at a party and there's someone in that party that doesn't have the best energy. You just pick up on it, just intuitionally. You just know that person is, a little bit negative, a little bit rough, and you spend time with that person. But then after when you leave, you find that you're drained and you're like, what happened? And a lot of times, again, being in the healing profession, because we give so much of ourselves to other people and we have our own beautiful healing energy, because of course we're in this field to be of service and you want to heal, that takes a lot of energy. But when you have somebody across from the table and that's, not in a good state, something's happening with their pet, and they have all this negative energy and they're blaming you for what's going on and what's happening and the repercussions and such, and you don't realize, but you're open and you want to heal that person, but you're taking on all this negativity, you're taking up all this negative energy. And in Eastern medicine, you always want to protect yourself. So similar to as Sonja had said about boundaries, this is the next layer, and it's called protection. So it's almost like you put yourself in this beautiful light, in this beautiful bubble, and that anything that comes to you negatively bounces off you. It doesn't get absorbed. So unfortunately, there's lots of research paper out there where say people who have chronic illnesses usually have taken in too much negative energy. And so again, it's another step that we can do. It doesn't cost anything. It's easy to do, but it's almost as when you go from one consult room to the other, you take your 3 breaths before you unlock that door and go inside, but at the same time, you protect yourself. So you imagine yourself in this beautiful white light and you're inside this bubble and your protection. So no matter what happens in that room, it doesn't get absorbed into your cells. And that's a big one.
I love that. Imagining the bubble. I know that there have been uh, trailers for the new movie, the new I'm having a brain fart with Glinda the Good Witch, and anyways, the sequel to the to Wicked. That's what it is. Oh yes, thank you. The sequel to Wicked is coming out, and I just imagine Glinda in her little bubble, and I love pink. I will imagine myself in this pink bubble going into the consult rooms, or stepping into the family gatherings where there's that similar negativity from some folks, and I do really tend to, soak it up like a sponge. Simi, you and I have had some conversations too about this importance of social connection, of belonging, of community. And we've certainly talked about this in the context of women experiencing perimenopause and, just feeling like you're not alone. And I think that holidays are particularly challenging for some folks because it brings up the fact that they feel alone, right? Maybe their family members have passed away, or they're estranged from them, or they're not in close proximity to them. Maybe they've moved across the world like Sophie has. What resources or support networks do you think are most effective for people this time of year when they are experiencing that loneliness or that disconnection, so to speak?
Right. I think people have to be proactive and create a community, especially if they know they're in that time when they feel more that they need people around them. They need more love. They need more people to be with them in a social situation. They have to create that community way beforehand, not just as when Christmas, when the holidays come apart, right? But there's so many groups that we can belong to. And now with social media, there's a whole different level. Before we were all in person when we met, right? When we had our group meetings and such, we had to be in person in an office, in a boardroom. And now that's a different layer now. But of course, we have our community right here that we've created, right? In this panel and with the guests on site as well. And that's powerful. So again, even in social media, even the internet, that can be a very proactive community. But again, you have to search and you have to feel what feels and what really brings you joy, what feeds you. Another thing during the holidays, because it's a time of a little bit more anxiousness, there's sometimes a disconnect between mind and body because we tend to be all up here and the mind tends to be busy and full of chatter and worry sometimes and anxiety. Then coming back into our body is a great bridge to bring the mind and body back together. And I always like to say, at this time of year especially, creativity. So there's so many things we can do that are available to us where we seek a community. Like you can make Christmas wreaths, you can learn how to paint, you can go for a wine and painting. Like there's all these little gatherings that they have. You can go for an exercise class, but something that brings you joy. Pickleball, whatever that may be, whether it be sports, whether it be arts, whether it be cooking, whether it be gardening, depending where you are. All those little things can create a sense of community, and you can feel a sense of belonging because that's a big one. Having that sense of I am safe, I am secure, I am home. That's our root chakra, our muladhara, like making sure that we're grounded and rooted. That's the first step. And then things start to flow. Once we feel very at home with ourselves, then the universe will say, we'll provide you with what you need to have in terms of community.
I love that. I often forget about these meetup groups and things where you can search for an interest of yours, and then immediately you are thrust into this community of like-minded folks who enjoy the same things you do. And it could be going on a walk or going on a hike or taking the dogs for a walk or whatever. It doesn't have to be expensive. It can be accessible. And the key is that you do need to be proactive. I don't think any of us can just sit at home waiting for someone to reach out and connect. We do unfortunately have to put ourselves out there to some degree. So I love that you're reminding people to do that. I'm mindful that we're coming up towards the end of our time, but yeah, Sophie, I see your hand up, and I wanted to turn it over to you as well to share sentiments on top of what Simmi shared, and also to think about what people can do in our profession now to prepare for future years of holiday stress. If there's any kind of key takeaways that you want to leave people with before we close out our discussion.
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to follow up with what Simmi was saying. One of the most wonderful things since having moved across New Zealand on my own, I'm experiencing all of this, trying to find my place, trying to find those social connections. And two things have really struck me from what Simmi was just saying. Firstly, one of my colleagues at work has invited me round for Christmas dinner with her family, which for me is just the most heartwarming thing ever. They don't have to do that. They're having their wonderful family celebration. So yeah, I think if you are in that position where you have colleagues who might be on their own or anything, that honestly has meant so much to me. So that's something simple. And it doesn't have to be Christmas dinner, even just say, oh, come around for some games or something for an hour or two. Yeah, I think that can be really powerful. So have a think about who's in your social network and how you can support others this time of year as well. And then the other thing was I volunteer for Girl Guides, and this struck me with what Simmi said about the creativity thing. I'm not a creative person at all. I like science and stuff like that is really my thing. But we just decided last night that we're going to decorate gingerbread houses for our last day of term. And I think I'm more excited about that than the girls are, actually. So I was like, yes, I'm so into this. And again, that's just, I think that speaks to exactly what Simmi was saying, doing something about that, that creative side, doing something a little bit different and finding that community and something that you can do with other people. So that's made a big difference for me this year. So yeah, So back to your final question, I guess. I think really we've pretty much covered everything that I would say. We've all talked about the fact that actually being proactive rather than reactive is so important. And actually, one of the biggest things I would say, again, maybe from a bit of a leadership perspective, is one thing that can be really powerful is having a post-Christmas wash up. So we all know that feeling of, oh, great, we've survived Christmas, on to the next, and we just like carry on with the next year, and then all of a sudden it's Christmas again, and we're like, how did this happen? And we're making the same mistakes that we made last year, and the same problems are happening, aren't they? Whereas actually, set aside some time intentionally, either as your leadership team or as a whole team, involve as many people as you can, or at least representatives from each area of your practice, and find out where the stretch points were, find out where those areas were that perhaps didn't quite work so well, and then you've got a whole year to make changes ready for the next year. Do you need to write some new protocols? Do you need to look at your staffing? Do you need to change your scheduling? Whatever it is, do you need to think about some of the things I talked about earlier about, your consultation lengths, those kind of things, and then you can really have them ready and in place for that following year. So yeah, it's that sort of start early, be proactive, don't be reactive, think about it, and make changes to make improvements. And then I think the final piece of advice I have that has made a big difference for me in the past, but also something I've done with my team, is have some emotional check-ins or some wellness check-ins with your team in the run-up to Christmas. So, that sort of October, November time, sit down with all your team members and find out where they're at, find out how they're doing, find out what their emotional capacity is and their physical capacity is at this point in time. And then you've got time before Christmas either to put in place the support they need or to make sure that as a team you're all supporting each other. So again, I think that can be a really powerful way to sort of, it's what we went back to earlier, isn't it? Supporting the whole team and making sure everybody's sort of moving into this time of year as well prepared as they can be, I think.
Oh, I love this. I even feel, this like debrief after Christmas. I feel like I'm gonna need like a family debrief. My fiance and his family and my family we're blending together at the Christmas. We're literally getting our new house days before Christmas, and just today we were like, what's happening on Christmas Day? What are we doing? And I think we're going to have to really check in with each other after it's all said and done to decide, okay, this is what worked, this is what didn't, and what might we want to engage with next year, and do that while it's top of mind versus you forget about it by the time it rolls around next year. So great advice. Well, this has been awesome. Like I said, I feel like this was exactly what I needed. So thank you to all of you for participating. I want to wrap up with some logistical things, but before I do that, in one word from each of you, I would love to hear, what are you most looking forward to as we approach the holiday season and the year end? What is one thing? And if just for time purposes, we will keep it to one word or one phrase. And Sonja, I'll start with you.
Oh, intentional connection with my community.
Love it. Simmi.
Love and joy.
Oh, beautiful. And Sophie?
New traditions.
New traditions. Oh my gosh, these are wonderful. Well, this has just been absolutely fantastic. I want to again thank everybody for participating, and thanks to everyone too who has joined us for the entirety of our discussion today. We're doing this for everybody in the vet community, and so it is so nice to have people here listening, and for those of you watching the recording. So again, thank you, Sonja, Simmi, and Sophie, my triple S team, for sharing your expertise and insights and really real world practical strategies. I think that's what's most important. And so many of these are wrapped up in science as well. As I mentioned earlier, both Simmi and Sophie are current Reviving Veterinary Medicine coaches. So if any of you are thinking of coaching in the new year, we have a complimentary 20-minute call. You can activate the QR code here, and you can be in touch with any one of our coaches to set up a free call. We also have one more offering in terms of a free webinar before the end of the year. So in a couple of weeks, I will be talking about communicating about money with compassion and clarity. This is a bit of a theme. Again, we were talking a lot about financial challenges and so on. So this is a webinar that is sponsored by Trupanion, and it is available for 1 hour of race credit, and you can register using the QR code provided. As I mentioned, this recording will be available. So if you really enjoyed this conversation, you want to share it with somebody on your team or your whole team, you can go to the Reviving Vet YouTube channel and you will be able to share the link. It will be uploaded shortly. Jamie will be able to do that. And you're welcome to ask questions or share comments on YouTube, and we'll be able to answer those as well. So thank you again for joining, for prioritizing your well-being. Again, before we go, I want everyone who's in attendance to take a moment to reflect on one small thing that you will try to do this holiday season to care for yourself or for your team, because even those very small changes matter, as you've heard from all of our panelists. So thanks again, everybody. Happy holidays to all of you, and we hope to see you again next time. Bye, everybody.